That's a really important thing. We have our negotiables and our non-negotiables as a family, and we're going to stick to it and make sure that we don't compromise on it. It's a lot easier to be flexible when we know we've got a structure to snap back to. But when we don't have something to snap back to, you just keep flexing and flexing and flexing, and that's just not healthy. Something's gonna give.
Faith Forged Fathers is a podcast focused on navigating fatherhood and growing what God has called us to be as fathers. My name is Matthew Green. I'm a father of 2 young sons, and the mission of this podcast is to provide a wide array of experiences, perspectives through interviewing guests from all stages of fatherhood. My hope is that we'll all learn together, gain encouragement and wisdom along the way. Thanks for listening. All right. Welcome to this episode of Faith Forged Fathers. Today, I'm really excited to have with me Josh Boonstra. One of my really great buddies, Jared Cash, was telling me like, "Hey, you got to talk to Josh." And when Jared tells me I got to talk to somebody, I was able to get synced up with him, and really grateful that he made the time to come on. So really excited to have him on today. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. And yeah, Jared's a good dude, and I've got a lot of respect for him. So when he recommended, I was like, okay, this is something I should probably check out.
Nice. I love that. So like we get kicked off on every podcast, we just love to hear, your background, your testimony, and your story.
Yeah. Let's see. Background, grew up in a small town, and parents divorced really young for me. And so just kind of grew up with that dynamic that, a lot of folks are familiar with nowadays, but it certainly impacted me in the just kind of the way that I saw the world, the way that I interacted with the world, and some of the experiences that I went through, and a lot of different people coming in and out of my life and changing schools and moving around a lot. And yeah, it was not always easy. For sure, looking back on it, man, I'm so grateful. It just shaped me in such a way that I'm really grateful for. But at the time, it was painful at times. Lifelong athlete, sports was like my outlet, and so kind of when changing schools and the new kid and lonely lunchtimes, it was recess where I really found my way and kind of proved myself like, yeah, I'm pretty good at kickball too, and I can do that. And so it was stuff like that, and ultimately that got me into like organized sports, and ended up playing college football at Division II, and was a quarterback and a wide receiver, and just lifelong athlete. So sports and health and fitness, played a big part in my life. And went on, got my degree in exercise science and became a personal trainer, and managed a couple of facilities, and was in health and fitness for a long time, about 8 years. And then that took me to Microsoft, and a really just crazy intersection of opportunity. And I've been at Microsoft for the last 9 years, and yeah, it's been a great run. And in terms of testimony, yeah, so as I said, my parents were divorced, and my dad and his side of the family was religious, like using that term intentionally. It was like religion was what we practiced. And on my mom's side, it was a lot less religious, a lot less formal. And yeah, it was Jesus kind of part of the conversation, sure, here and there, but it wasn't, kind of regularly practiced. And the religion that we followed, we're Christian, of course, but like the church was so formal, and the messages were so formalized. And I think that expectations of the church were really high, and the community was really high. And it just felt like if you didn't show up at your very best, there's probably a little bit of judgment that came along with that. And I felt that, it's kind of a heavy feeling from a young age. And hey, get ready for church, and, put on your best face and your best clothes, and, do all the things, because if we don't, we can't go. And that just was such a weird concept to me. I'm like, the way we talk about Jesus, I don't feel like he should care.
Yeah, these pieces aren't fitting together, right?
Yeah, it was just a bit of a strange dynamic. And so I never connected with it. And because, I was with my dad only every other weekend at most, I just never gelled with the Sunday school kids. They were clearly studying the Bible and in the Word a heck of a lot more than I was. I wasn't at all. And, it's prayer time, and they're just reciting verses left and right. And they just were so comfortable in that environment, and I was so uncomfortable, and it just only got more uncomfortable. So that
Sure.
shaped my faith and my view on God and Jesus. And I had no relationship, and if I'm being totally honest, like I kind of rejected anything that was like Christ focused. I felt like it was pushed on me so hard as a kid that I really just started pushing back, and I didn't want to listen to, you know, Christian music. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to participate in conversation. I just didn't want it at all. And then, um, and then I met my now wife, and man, everything changed. And so
When
not
was
only was
that?
I head of,
Was that college? After college? Kind of when was that when you
yeah, it
met
was
her?
after college.
Okay.
We were both working for the same organization in health and fitness. We were both personal trainers. We were both young and into the same things. And um, yeah, it didn't take me long. I fell real fast and tried to convince her that I was, somebody she should invest into. But, quickly in our relationship, I could see that faith was just such a huge part of her life. And she was not pushing it on me. And she wasn't, like marketing it as a thing. I just saw her living it. And she'd talk about it when I wanted to talk about it. And she would, t- you know, because she was living it out in her life through some really difficult circumstances. Her mom had cancer and has since passed from it, and just so difficult, to go through that
Mm-hmm.
and to see the way her mom leaned on her faith, who was just an incredible Christ follower and was such a strong woman. And to see that was like, wow, okay, this is doing something really powerful in her mom's life, and it's clearly doing something powerful in her life. And, on Sundays, she'd be like, hey, I'm going to go to church. You want to come? I'm like, nah, I don't think so. And she would go. She's like, oh, okay, cool. Didn't judge me. No, no second word about it. She'd go off and do her thing. And, eventually I was like, I think I need to go with her. I need to check this out too, kind of get back in. I don't even know what church she's going to. Like, what's the message like? What's the vibe like there? And it was a totally different church and a totally different vibe, and serious faith for sure, but much more casual environment. And I'm coming away from those messages like thinking, about things I hadn't thought of
Nice.
before, and feeling a little bit more connected. And, it kind of sparked some curiosity on different topics. Um, and so that got me going into like a regular kind of cadence of just going to church again and being open to that. And was it every Sunday for me? Nah, not every Sunday, but it was, man, it was a heck of a lot more consistent than I had been in the last several years. So that was kind of the start for me. And just seeing how she was living it out made me like sincerely want to invest in building up my faith again. And that was the start of the journey. We're still on a journey, but that was the major turning point for me where I started, hey, I'm going to start investing in my faith again and really build a relationship with Jesus that I didn't have.
That's really powerful. So, how long did it kind of take, when you were kind of back in it to go from, I'm sure you had a very legalistic perspective in terms of like what Christianity is from your past to like, kind of
Mm.
sitting there maybe in the first couple messages like, wow, this grace thing's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so true. We were going to a big monster church, and I don't know how many thousands of people were there in this massive auditorium, which was not my vibe at all. I kind of try to avoid big crowds if I can. But the pastor was pretty great, and his messages were really resonating, and he was delivering it with real sincerity. And I'm like, I believe this guy, I trust this guy, and now I'm willing to hear what he's saying. And then the messages start to sink in. But we knew that wasn't probably the church vibe for us if we were going to like become members and really get invested in the community. And we moved to a small town, and in that small town there was a church that just kicked off, and it was like 2 minutes from us. And like, sure enough, let's go check that out first weekend. And we were dang near the first members there. It had opened, I think, the weekend prior, and so we got into this church at like ground zero. And funny enough, we were in a season of our marriage. Our kids are now 11 and 7, and at that time they were really young. We had one, and anybody who's a parent knows what that's like. Having your first young kiddo and trying to just navigate all that comes with that. And, and be civil to each other
Yeah.
at the same time when you're running on no sleep
Sure.
and new routines and all the things. And so we were in that season, and we were at each other a little bit more than we typically were. And I was like, man, this is hard. This is heavy. I'm not used to this like friction in our relationship. We just hadn't really experienced that. And as wonderful as a communicator as I think I am, I was not able to say what I was feeling in a way that was landing. And so that was adding to the frustration. And then we go to church. And this first day, and the message, when you have those messages that you're just like, boom, it just hits you. And I was like,
I
oh
feel,
my
I feel like they're
goodness,
preaching right to you, right? You're just like, might
absolutely.
as well make eye contact with the guy.
Yeah, I'm like, did somebody tip him off? That's what's going on here.
Your
You
wife's like,
know?
hey, I really need you to preach on this.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. And, and so you have those moments in church, and it's like, wow, this is really powerful. And it just was exactly what we needed to hear. And that was a like turning point in our marriage at that point. We had a super healthy marriage, but we were going through it at the time. And that thing just like clicked, and we started a different trajectory. And I was all in at that point. I'm like, this is the power that our faith, our collective faith, can have in our marriage and in our lives. And I don't want to be without this anymore. And
Mm.
so then that's where things kind of started to accelerate more. And I'll be the first to tell you, like, I'm not, I'm still on a journey. I'm still on this journey. And my wife is so dedicated and disciplined and much further along in her faith journey than I am. But, I can say that I'm on one at least. And
Yeah, no,
that's something. And I wasn't before. And, another part of this journey for us was she was going to like a growth group, we call it, or a Bible study basically. And she's like, Josh, would you want to come to these? And that was so far out of my comfort zone. I was not on board. Like, look, hey, we got this cool new cadence going. I'm really into church, and like I'm feeling it, and and I'm committed to this, but that feels like like another environment. I'm going to get judged for what I don't know.
was it kind of
And
like
that was
flashback to when you were younger, like how you felt around the Sunday school kids that were regularly there? Was it kind of like just a flashback
100%,
to that? Mm.
100%. And I was like, that I don't want to sign up for that again. And it's because I had a vision of what it was like. Hey, we're going to go around, we're going to read our verses, and we're all going to talk about how much we know about the Bible. And I'm like, that's not where I'm at. And I don't want to. I don't want to be humiliated again, and really like slow down what I feel like is a little bit of momentum in this journey that I'm on. And so, no, thanks, not this time. Okay, and she didn't judge me, and she didn't. She asked again later. Hey, it's another season of our growth group. Are you interested? And nah, I think I'm gonna pass again. And it was probably 3 or 4 of these different like seasons. And then she's like, Josh, I actually think you would like this. Here's what it's like. So then I started asking more questions. Well, it's like this. Do they do that?
Is
No,
there
no,
are there
yeah,
quizzes like what?
yeah, yeah. And she's like, no. Finally, I was like, all right, you know what? Let's give it a go. So I went, and it was nothing like I thought. And it was a bunch of very normal people talking just about their journey in life and just experiences that they've gone through and where faith showed up for them and challenges that they're dealing with. And I think I spoke the most out of anybody at the darn gathering, and I was like, oh, this was unexpected. um, and so then I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this, I can participate, this is okay. And so we did like 3 or 4 seasons of that, and then fast forward, and now we're hosting our own growth groups, and that's just been a really cool journey. And it just helps. I need things like that to keep me invested, keep me accountable, where I got to show up and help facilitate conversation and lead people a little bit on their journey and just be a part of it with them. That gives me a lot of joy and satisfaction. So that's kind of where we're at in our journey now.
That's great. I think one thing that's really amazing through all that is just it's. I think your wife's like I would just consistency through all of it, right? And it's like not
Hmm.
there was no like you must come, you must go, but just like being that like godly example of just walking the walk, and it's just kind of like I want some of that. I think that's
Big
pretty
time.
amazing. I love that. My wife's very similar in terms of like where I perceive her in terms of like how far she's, I view her as very far ahead of me, faith journey wise. Like if there was like a formal Bible quiz, like she'd probably score better than me.
Yeah.
But I'm right along with you. Just like it's a journey, right? It's a marathon. It's probably an ultra marathon. Where I'm at like
Hmm.
a couple miles in here in the grand scheme of things, but it's like as long as I keep putting one foot in front of the other, I hopefully we get to where we're hoping to head.
Yeah, so true.
But well, cool. And you kind of hit on some of this, and this is a question I want to start incorporating kind of into the podcast. So you're going to be guest one that kind of gets to kick off some of these questions. But
Game on. Let's do it.
what so how has your faith helped forge you into the man and father that you are today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if I was to kind of boil it down, it makes me so consistent in who I am and how I show up, and the values that I carry and live out on a day to day basis. I think that's the core of what it does for me. Um, kind of practically how that comes to life. As a younger kid, yeah, I had a good heart, I had good intentions, I meant well, and then I'd go off and do something stupid, and like
Hmm.
just, oh boy, that's not a good decision, or that was not wise, or that was clearly, sinful behavior. And I didn't really hold myself all that accountable to it. Knew it was like, yeah, I don't want to do that too often. I'd go back to, behaving well again. And, now I've got a much clearer sense of who I am and who I want to be and kind of the life that I want to live and the example that I want to set for my kids. And, you know, at some point in the journey, you kind of have those moments where you're like, yeah, I could do this, but what does that, what does that do for me? How does that compromise my values and my faith? And so then you course correct and you're like, no, I'm going to live this way. I'm going to do this thing. And certainly, I still make plenty of mistakes on a daily basis. Um, but you exercise that and you exercise your faith for such a period of time that it starts to become a lot more natural and instinctive. And, you don't think about it and just kind of the way that you operate now. And so, um, that's been the goal at least. And then where I get the most satisfaction is when, we see our kids living it out too.
Hmm.
And just the lifestyle that they are taking on, not because we demand it of them, but because that's how they see us live as parents.
Yeah.
And they, you know, at this stage, we're still kind of role models to them, thankfully, and they follow in our footsteps. And so it gives me so much more incentive to, live a Christ filled life and a faith filled life. And because I want my kids to have that from day one, where it
Hmm.
took me 30 years to get there.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I think ultimately our kids are gonna kind of emulate kind of what we do and what we prioritize and what we show them is important to us, right? We can tell them what to do and what they should do all day long, but if it doesn't mirror how we are acting and we're behaving, they're gonna be like, well, you know, do as I say, not as I do is like, you know, I think it's one of my personal pet peeves as a dad, and so like it's always like trying to walk the
Absolutely.
walk, um, every single
Yeah,
day.
100%.
But so one of the topics, I just kind of doing a quick pivot that Jared was like, you've got to talk to Josh about this. This guy's a rock star in this category, and I think you've kind of alluded to some of the like liking, maybe some structure and things of how you do, whether
Yeah,
that's growth groups and I don't know if it goes back to playing sports and having all that kind of stuff in your background, but I definitely want to talk about structure for family time now, and maybe I don't know, that's about as deep as I have context wise, but I'd love to hear,
yeah.
um, maybe if you can give some context and maybe how you guys approach that, because I think one of the things that I hear the most from dads in terms of not spending time in the Word, not feeling like they're growing in their faith. It's just like, oh, I'm too busy. I've got too much going on. Um, you know, I don't have time for it. And those kind of things get lost in the little margin that they feel like they have. And so, I would love to
Mhm.
hear kind of maybe how you've intentionally approached kind of maybe some family structure and how you make sure that family time gets prioritized.
Yeah, yeah, gosh. Well, I'm grateful that Jared pointed that out. That means a lot. It is something that we're very intentional about. I'm trying to think where this kind of all starts. I mean, my wife and I were both athletes, played college sports, and obviously, if you're playing college sports, you probably had a sports background well beyond that or well prior to that. And so, having goals and discipline and putting a system in place to achieve those goals is just part of our DNA, and we're both wired that way. In fact, she's even more disciplined than I am. And so, we set our minds to something, and then we figure out how do we accomplish that and what's meaningful to us. And also because we know that this is a long game, like life is a long game. And so you want to set yourself up with daily habits that allow you to accomplish the things you want to accomplish over a long period of time. It's not
Mm,
about the immediate satisfaction now. It's about, hey, adopting habits that we think are sustainable over the long term, because those things are going to allow us to live the life we want to live and accomplish what we want to accomplish. So, like, we've taken that approach individually, and then as we've come together as a married couple, we kind of double down on it because we know how important it is to us and the health of our marriage. And if we're not healthy between she and I, then it just trickles down to our kids, and
mm.
they're gonna feel the effects of that. So we're very intentional about it. I recall, so for first when we got married, I'm gonna go off on a bit of a tangent here. Bear
Go
with
for it.
me.
Nope.
Um, Someone encouraged us to do marriage counseling, pre-marriage counseling, and my wife Angela, she's all about it. It was through the church at the time, and she's like, "Let's do it. Come on, Josh." And I was still back in the. This was before growth group, and I'm like, pre-marriage counseling through the church. What's that look like? I don't know. But ultimately, like, hey, this is kind of a big deal we're embarking on. I should probably make the investment into our marriage. So we did it. It was kind of awesome and hilarious, and but really life-giving, and we it helped facilitate conversations between she and I that we would never have had otherwise. And one of those conversations was, define your roles as a married couple. Define them. What are you going to be as a husband? What are the things you're
Mm.
going to do? Are you the one that's going to mow the lawn? Are you the one that's going to do the dishes? Are you the one that's going to fold the laundry? Do you guys have a same bank account? Do you have your own bank accounts? Like, talk through all of this stuff. And that was like, oh yeah, we should probably kind of figure some of this stuff out. So it was a great prompt for us to have those kinds of conversations, and the role defining was critical. We refer to that so frequently, like, "Hey, remember we decided this?" And we're both like, "Yep, yep,
Yep.
that's it. We knew going in." And so that allows us to operate with so much freedom and clarity and lack of resentment, which is kind of the thing that tends to build up over time if you don't define lurking in the
Yep.
sink. Well, who's on that? Well, we know. Hey, the
You okay?
yard's getting out of hand. What's the
Mm-hmm.
scoop? Well, we know who's on the hook for that. And then there's a thousand more things, that you define your roles against. And because we're so intentional about creating clarity there, it we own it. We
Mm.
both own it. And so that then frees up the time and the structure for the family. And it's as basic as when we first had our kid, I was like, hey, nap time's a thing. We're doing it. We're not compromising nap time. And so wants us to come out with them. Thanks for the invite. No, that's going to disrupt nap time or bedtime. And, I don't want to, I need my bedtime too, by the way. I need to sleep. And so does my wife. And we were just so rigid to the point where we got a little bit criticized for it at first. Um, where, friends are like, man, you kind of need to be a little bit more flexible. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. But I think we've got a plan here.
Yeah.
And then,
Did
you
they have
know,
kids? Were they friends that didn't quite have them yet, or were they peers
definitely
with
a mix.
mix? Okay.
Yeah, definitely a mix. Some that were, older friends of ours that had kids that were in high school or college, and some that were didn't have kids, and it was all over the board. But what everybody noticed was how well behaved our kids were, and how consistent their behavior was, and they just go to bed. You don't have to spend an hour upstairs doing a whole routine, and just all the things started to kind of show up, and we're like, yeah, that's kind of how it works, and you know did we get a little lucky along the way? Probably. But we did have a plan as well. And so it's just that level of intentionality of, hey, we're going to stick to the game plan. We're going to carve time out for dinner. That's a really important thing. We have our negotiables and our non negotiables as a family. And we're going to stick to it and make sure that we don't compromise on it. And kids really thrive with structure, as do
Mm-hmm.
parents, by the way.
Yep.
But we've just overemphasized structure, and then we know we're going to flex, and we're totally cool with flexing, and it's a lot easier to be flexible when we know we've got a structure to snap back to. But when we don't have something to snap back to, you just keep flexing and flexing and flexing, and that's just not healthy. Something's gonna give after all the flexing, and it's usually a lot of the things that you want. Your diet goes by the wayside, your exercise routine, there's no more time for now. You don't look or feel like you want to look and feel, and your mood is fluctuating up and down, and it's just micro compromises that start to accumulate, you know,
Mm.
over the course of time. And if you're not aware that that's a possibility, then it happens to you. But if you know that you want to control those things long term, you can at least set yourself up for success by being really intentional with the systems you put in place.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. That made me think of I don't know if you follow Jocko Willink or not,
Oh
but he
yeah.
has his paradox. It sounds like a paradox, but like discipline equals freedom, and a lot of people are like, no, that doesn't make any sense. But it's like you kind of just hit the nail on the head. It's like by having discipline and having specific time carved out for certain things, then you have those points of freedom that you can operate in. Right?
100%. Yeah, man, he's got a lot of good books and good messages. What's crazy is that I could walk you through an entire day. I could have all the things that I do in a cadence in a row, and at this time we do that, and on this day we eat that, and Tuesdays is,
Would
we
you? I
eat that
mean,
meal.
would you mind walking through like a high level kind of what it looks like?
Sure.
I'm totally up for giving. I think men like thrive on like tactical, like practical kind of advice. So like
Oh yeah.
I'm super interested to hear what that looks like because I went from like a really structured schedule with my first, and then my youngest came around and he was just like, oh, that's cute, dad. Like, and he just like kind of bucked the system, and I'm still trying to like, nope, this is how
Yeah.
we do things. And so I've been struggling to find that kind of similar routine and schedule that I had for 6 years that the young one was like, no sir. But I would love to hear, you don't have to go through all 7 days of the week by any means, but it's like maybe there's like an example of a weekday and maybe what a weekend looks like for you.
Yeah, yeah, happy to. Um, Over the years, we've invested a lot in our home gym, and so we knew that, hey, if exercise is going to be a really consistent part of our lives, we need to make it as convenient as possible. So we've built out a really awesome home gym, and that's kind of where the day starts. So here's a typical day. Alarm goes off at 5 a.m. for my wife. She gets up and heads into the garage first, and we pass like ships in the night. She does her workout from 5 to 6. My alarm goes off at 6. I've usually already had a coffee before my alarm goes off, and then I head into the garage about 6:30, start stretching. Meanwhile, she jumps in the sauna, and so I'm warming up, and I'll do my workout. Usually, I'm moving weights by. Uh, I get in there at 6:30. I'm warming up. I'm moving weights by 7. I'll be done by 8:15 to 8:30. I'm in. I grab my shower. I've got the benefit of working from home, and so I'll be cleaned up with my second coffee in hand in front of my computer by 9, and I'll smash through the workday and be super productive. Um, we both intermittent fast, and so my fast window breaks at 11. I eat usually like at 11:01. I don't take it a minute longer. I'm ready for
You're
some
you're
food.
ready to rock.
Yeah, so I'll have my lunch then. Um, I've got a gallon jug of water that I'm slugging down throughout my workout, and I'll get through a gallon usually by noon. And so that's lots of trips to the bathroom included in there as well. And yeah, my work day, and I'll continue that. My work day wraps at um, totally depends, but usually 5:30 to 6, something like that. I'll have a snack in there somewhere as well. Then we're at dinner as a family around the table at that 5:30 to 6 time frame. We've been very intentional about making time for that because I'm able to work from home now, and we're allowed to. And before in my previous career, that just wasn't an option, and I missed so many family moments. I didn't get to go to the bus stop with the kids, and I didn't get to have dinner at all with the family. So super blessed to be able to do that now, and we take full advantage of it. And yeah, hang with the kids after dinner till it's bedtime. Usually my kid wants to play catch with the football in the house, and so I'll throw him 1,000 footballs before bedtime, and my daughter's reading or sharing her latest creations. We put them down at 7 o'clock, and they get to read for about 30 to 45 minutes in their room or play Legos or whatever. They put themselves to sleep. We pray over them right before they go to bed, and then usually we'll watch a show, something on Netflix, and then we're in bed at 8:30. We'll read for 30 minutes. I'm out cold by 9:30 at the latest, and then it all starts over. That's
Man,
pretty solid day.
that's impressive. And that is that. You know, how about a weekend? And when you don't have the work in there, it's like maybe what's a Sunday look like for you guys?
Yeah, Sunday for us is we don't work out that day, so we wake up. We get to have our coffees together in the morning. That's a nice treat. So my wife and I will sit on the couch, enjoy coffee and some conversation. When we're in the midst of growth group, we always sauna Sunday morning. That's the day I get to go in the sauna. We do what's called our hot seat conversation. If we're leading growth group, we go through the homework, we're answering the questions, and then we sit and talk about it. Like, what was your take on this? What was my take on that? What do we think we want to lead the group through? What's kind of the conversation we want to have today? And just be really thoughtful about the approach that we'll take with the growth group, and how we want to set that up for success, and the people in the group. Who do we think has got an interesting perspective, and maybe we could help set them up for that. And so super thoughtful there. And that's our hot seat conversation Sunday morning in the sauna. So we'll have a great sweat. We'll hit the shower, off to church. We go to the 11 o'clock service. We usually serve. And so we'll arrive at, 10 and help greet for a while. And then we'll hit that service and come home, have some lunch. If it's football season, we are definitely watching, football. Go Hawks. Not a great season for Hawks. We'll
Oh,
watch some football in
Seahawks.
the
Sorry,
afternoon.
is that call it? Okay,
Oh
took me a
yeah,
second.
Seahawks.
Sorry.
Sorry, that's our squad.
This
We're
Cowboys country down here in Texas, so I was just kidding.
That's right. Yeah, Jared. Yeah, Jared and his Cowboys. He's not a
Oh
Hawks
yeah,
fan
yeah, yeah. I
either.
forgot he's a big Cowboys fan. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so we'll watch some football in the afternoon, and then kind of the evening is like family, super family chill, very relaxed time. I love like a good Sunday night family movie where we can cuddle up together and watch. I'll force the kids to watch some Disney movie that I grew up with or something like that. And then, yeah, our nightly routine, put the kids down, same deal. Wife and I, if we've already watched a show, we'll get in bed early and read, and um, yeah, out cold at an early time, and then we start our weekday.
That's super cool. I I just kind of one thing out of curiosity. On the serving front, was that a similar kind of progression for you in terms of like, was your wife like, hey, let's go serve, and were you like, well, hold on, like, kind of was that a similar dynamic, or were you kind of at the point where you're like, all right, no, let's do this?
Oh, it was definitely similar. Like I fought it for a while, and like tithing too. That was something I was like,
Mm.
hey, man, I hang on to we were so poor growing up, and you start to make a little bit of money, and now what do you want me to do? You want me to give help? What? I just couldn't get on board with that. That was a very difficult thing for me. And then I remember the pastor was like, hey, here's the deal. And, he went through his kind of message about its importance. And And like, okay, I understand that, but I'm still having a hard time with this. And he wasn't speaking directly to me, but I kind of thought that he was. It's like, hey, try it for a month. And, if you don't feel like your life has been improved, you're getting blessed in some area, then we'll give it back. And I was like, what? Now, I had no intention of asking for money back once we had given it, but the fact that he was taking that stance, that was interesting. I had never had a pastor, up there talking about money, make that kind of a pitch. And I was like, all right, that's a little different. Let's give this a go. And yeah, I can honestly say that our life has been so blessed since then. And, you know, still sometimes my like, gulp, how much do we give?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens still. But then I think about all the blessings we've received over the years, and it's just, there's no question, something that will continue, and we do it with real, pride and intent. So,
Yeah, tithing was something that I struggled with as well for a long time because I was very like kind of tight fist on it. Like, no, I've put so much into this, this career, and then I've got to this level. And our pastor always one thing he says a lot that I really like is like, you don't give to a church, you give through a church. And so I think a
mm,
lot of it was like part of it just like seeing the impact that was coming from it, and he'd always, you can't outgive God, and so like whatever you give, give in a tithe, like he's gonna bless, tenfold, whatever it may be. And so yeah, it was like one of those things that took me a long time to finally. I'd always do it real sporadically, and then I finally just had to like I had to set it like automatically, like just pull it, don't let me see it.
hmm
But now like at the end of the year, I'm always like, oh, like this is, I feel so great that it's part of it. And you don't ever miss it, you know.
yeah,
And we
yeah,
actually did something really similar where we had like I think we had like a pay off our debt kind of campaign because I go to a pretty big church and we had like
mm-hmm.
I think 15 million in debt. So he was very open about it,
Ooh-wee.
and he because we have a really large campus and all that kind of stuff, and they knocked it out in 15 months, and so
What?
our church is debt free now.
Oh,
But he
wow.
was like, hey, yeah, like for the next 90 days, we're gonna try to like hit this milestone, and we do that a lot with like we have our church has like basketball courts covered, like a covered pavilion, pickleball
Mm,
courts, and a bunch of different things because our pastor's like, I want people spending time on campus as much as possible, even if it's just recreationally. And like,
yeah.
in preparation for that, we did like a 90-day kind of thing. And he's like, at the end of the 90 days, if you don't feel like your life is changed or you feel like you're being blessed, like hit us up. We'll give it right back to you. And
Hmm.
I think like the claim rate on that was pretty low, but
Yeah,
just because I think
for
people
sure.
were all noticing the life change and everything from it. So that's really interesting to hear you guys did something similar. Um, and I know it's kind of way back, but I absolutely love to hear that y'all went through a similar pre-marriage kind of exercise. We did this like a very similar one,
Mm,
and like I recommend it to a lot of my friends even who are like currently married, because the amount of like passive aggressiveness that it like dissolves is
yeah.
tremendous, right? There's none of that, like to your point, why aren't when is he going to do the dishes? When is she going to do this? Like I know as soon as I hit start on that dishwasher, I'm not touching a dish. Like I flip that little sign around to clean, and I'm like, all
Oh,
right,
yeah.
this is balls in your court. My wife's a genius though, because that was her job, and when her son got old enough, she outsourced it. She's like, "Hey, buddy, I've got a great
Yeah.
chore you can do," and I'm like,
Heck
"Oh,"
yeah.
she beat me to it. But that's cool. So, I
Yeah.
mean, so with the kind of the week that you guys kind of have structured with, do y'all have like a planning session once a week where y'all sit down and like, hey, what's the week look like, or is it kind of just like you guys are in a rhythm? What's
Yeah.
up?
It, honestly, we're just so conditioned to the rhythm. We don't. And now my wife, she's in the driver's seat of like, she's the, COO of our household with kiddo sports schedules and, all the extracurricular activities. And, I know my role is like the protector and the provider, and she is the organizer and the planner. And it works for us, and it works really well. And she kind of tells me where to be and what to do. And, I go along with it, and we thrive that way. And so it's worked for us for so long. And we, we know what we're going to have for dinner on each night of the week. And so that's, check. We don't need to plan that out. She knows the groceries that she needs to prepare those meals, and she does that. Um, and we just, yeah, man, I'm just grateful to have food on the table, and
Mm.
gosh, she makes it a meal for us, and it's healthy, and our kids love it, and I love it, and we know what's coming. There's no questions asked, and we just, as I said, we just kind of know our roles, and because we know also what each day tends to look like, there's no questions, and we know what we're going to prioritize. And that stuff comes up. There's always opportunities and invitations and things that we can go do. And yeah, then we'll sit down and be like, hey, we had this, we've got that. Do you want to, let's make a decision here. And in fact, we just did that today. Something came up. Hey, we got this invite, and what do we want to do? And let's talk it through. Well, what's important to us? Do we want to stretch ourselves a little thinner to make that thing happen, or do we want to
Mm.
really prioritize like being together as a family? And we said, yeah, well, that would be cool and it would make them feel better. I think it'd be hard for us. And, let's do the uncomfortable thing and say thanks, but no thanks. And prioritize just that as a recalibration period for our family to just kind of relax and kind of reunite, because we know that we're going to need it after the week that we're going to have. And we have we literally just had that moments ago. We have those conversations a lot. And because we're so aligned on our priorities and kind of what we want to accomplish as a family and how we want to show up and where we're not really willing to sacrifice stuff if we can avoid it, they're pretty easy conversations most of the time.
I think that highlights the importance of just, like you said, communication, especially with your spouse. And I'm sure that there's, talks that, you're having with your kids too. And just like your family, just having that open dialogue with each other. And I'm
Mm.
sure some people at times are like, I would really like to do that. But, once you guys are all able to maybe come together and you're able to highlight, the more kind of broad dynamic or the impact on the family, um, I'm guessing that probably helps kind of alleviate any disappointment, and there's more of an understanding of why you are or are not doing something.
That's so right. And, the other kind of layer to that is like, we'll do that as a family. We do it in front of our kids, and so they'll see, hey, mom and dad are working through something, and here's how they talk to each other, and here's how they squash conflict, or here's how they love on each other. Um, here's how they're making decisions together. And yeah, we just do that openly, and they get to see it. And you guess what? The big benefit of that is when we're working through decisions, they kind of know how we've rationalized decisions in the past. They get to participate and be like, well, what about this? And here's how we think about that. And they're like, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And hey, I hadn't thought about that, and good memory. I'm glad you brought that up. And so they get to share, their insights and participate in the conversation. And now we're all bought in as a family on the
Yeah,
decision that we've made, because we kind of all landed there together. And uh, that wasn't necessarily by design, but once we identified that was like, oh, this is a thing, this is a benefit of doing it like this, then you start to be a little bit more systematic and planful and intentional about, how you do that. And yeah, that's been part of our learning as parents
yeah.
and just the journey we're on.
No, I love that a lot. I've noticed it. So my oldest is 8, and so your youngest is kind of right in that ballpark. At 7. That it's interesting how, like, I don't say complex, but like even at 8, he has his own things he's trying to
Mm.
navigate and balance. And so to be able to get insight, like, when I went into parenting, if I was like, oh, I need to make sure that, like, I want input from my 8-year-old on a decision, he'd be like, no way, like, dad, he's got the gavel, he makes the decisions. And then once you're like in it, you're like, oh, like, you have a lot of things you're trying to navigate and weigh too. And so being able to kind of have that dialogue with your kids is so great. And they don't feel like, I think my son is more like willing to share how he feels or what he thinks on stuff when he knows it's going to be considered in,
That's
like,
right.
in a decision, versus just it being shut down, like, hey, go shut up and color, kind of thing.
That's right.
It's been really, really cool to see uh, how he gets super bought in on family decisions.
I mean, that dynamic that exists for, professionals every day. You can be in a
No, that's
corporate,
true.
I'm in a corporate environment, and I have seen that countless times where essentially you're told to shut up and go color. Like your opinion doesn't matter here. And how
Mm-hmm.
defeating is that? What's your incentive to speak up next time? Zero. I don't want to participate in that conversation again. I probably don't want to be around that person all that much. Um, you know, Respect is one of my core values. And so to me, that's so disrespectful that I carry that with me a lot. And now I am not perfect, but with our kids, when you show them that same level of respect, they just thrive. And, they
Mm.
don't feel like they're being treated as kids, but a part of the family. And so, yeah, I don't get that right all the time. And I definitely don't. I'm not trying to suggest that. But I like that dynamic is very real. And having been on the receiving end of it, on the bad side of it, where I just felt like I was told to go color, like,
Mm-hmm.
thanks, but no thanks. Off you go. Oof, that's deflating. And I don't want to make anybody feel that way. Partner, professional, my wife, my kids. That's not a cool feeling. So, yeah, that's part of how we try to engage with the kids as well as show them the same kind of respect that we'd want to receive ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Now, one just really quick topic. I know I didn't kind of put this in like the areas that we might talk about, but we've talked
Dog
about
hard.
no, yeah, it should be right up your alley. So you've mentioned like the importance of fitness and health and stuff to you and your wife. Um, how much does being in a good physical condition do you feel translate to you being able to show up as your best self as a dad and husband and things like that?
Oh man, hard to put into words. You know, Ultimately, having been an athlete my whole life, like it's such a part of my identity, health and fitness and being active and, looking a certain way and performing a certain way and feeling a certain way is so deeply like ingrained in who I am that it's really hard to think of what it would be. Who would I be without that? And now that's not where I find my identity, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't part of my identity and a big part. So I invest a lot into making sure that I sustain habits that are going to keep that going for me. Um, and I know that if I don't, I'm not the same. I don't show up the same way. I don't show up the way that I want to. And if I'm not in a good exercise routine and kind of performing at a level that I feel like I should be performing at, and um, if I don't look like I want to look, I don't feel that great. About myself, or less confident, and it affects me in many ways. And the reality is that shows up in the way that I interact with everybody around me.
Hmm.
If I'm feeling a little down or less confident, or insecure or anything related to that, it affects the way that I show up with people. And I want to be my best self with people. And so I know that in order to do that, this is a big part of it for me. And my faith is a huge part as well. But my fitness and my health is a huge part of it. And so I invest a lot there because I know that ultimately it just helps me be better in every aspect of my life, parenting included.
Nice. Yeah, I notice when I'm in a good like physical fitness, nutrition kind of oriented routine, I my like emotional stability is so much better.
Oh yeah.
I'm much like slower to anger, and I'm able to navigate complex situations a lot more level headed than if I'm not. But no, that's
I
awesome.
mean, oh, sorry, I was going to not get too scientific on you there, but like kiddos, for example, when you give them, when they're eating healthy and a balanced nutrition, the way that they're metabolizing fuel is much more consistent. Therefore, their mood is much more consistent because their hunger is much more consistent. And the way when they're full and satiated, much more consistent. Consistency being the theme there. Like if you
Mm.
create it in one area, you're probably going to benefit from it in another area. Consistency. And I can't tell you, how many kids I've been around that, gosh, what are, you eat nothing but crackers and sugar, and that is about it. And then a meal, forget about it. Well, you're not hungry. Well, why aren't you hungry? Well, because you had 7 snacks, 45 minutes before the meal. And now, no judgment, but then we just need to understand why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. Not that this is the core cause, but gosh, it makes a difference. And guess what? Adults are the same way. We go
Yeah.
long periods without eating, or we eat really poor foods. It does impact our mood and our behavior. And so, where you can create consistency, even at the most fundamental level, what do you fuel yourself with? It's going to impact the way that you behave and how you feel. And yeah, so sorry.
No,
That was a bit
no,
of a rant.
no, not at all. I think that that's great. I think it's easy to like get upset with like the like you try to treat try to make sure I get this right. It's like you try to treat the symptom versus trying to go upstream to the maybe to
Mm,
the cause, right? So you just see maybe the result of a poor inconsistent diet and you're like, I'm going to discipline this out of you, versus being like, well, maybe there's something maybe farther up the stream that we can like get ahead of so that the outcome doesn't actually ever kind of transpire. Maybe it's making sure that I'm not spiking your blood sugar repeatedly through the day and having you on
yeah.
a crappy nap schedule, and not giving you any rhythm and routine in your day. So you're tired, you're hungry, and you're acting out. And so now, rather than me just like simply just coming at you, upset myself,
Hmm.
maybe I can kind of, it's probably more on the parent than they realize, that their kiddos' behavior. So I think that that's
Yeah. Well
a
said.
really important thing to highlight. Um, well, good stuff, man. So kind of want to pivot over to the kind of this last little segment, wrapping up with two questions here. So the first one is, so what rhythms and routines have helped you grow the most in your faith?
Yeah, I think just getting on a regular cadence of going to church, becoming part of a community and being around people that are like-minded and Christ followers, and just ingesting a good message on a regular basis. That's been a big one for me because it helps me then, stay connected to my faith, every day. And then growth groups has been another big one, and we talked about that before, but that has got me more in the word than I'd ever been before, and then more thoughtful about what I'm actually consuming and how do I interpret that? How do I think this shows up for me? How do I think it shows up for others? How do I help guide others in their journey? How do I talk about my own journey in a way that I think might resonate with somebody else? It's helped me be really thoughtful, or a lot more thoughtful at the very least, about my faith. And so I think those are the two kind of obvious pillars for me that have really helped accelerate my faith journey.
Nice, I like that. And then the second question, just kind of, I'm really interested to hear from folks. So, what is your favorite verse?
It, well, I'm biased. So now it's in Joshua 1:9, I believe,
Hmm,
which
it's a good one.
is be strong and courageous and don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you are. And Joshua is probably one of the first books of the Bible that I got into. I was kind of curious, well, what's going on in Joshua? Um, but where that really strikes a chord with me is like being courageous. I put a lot of emphasis on leadership and getting out of my comfort zone, and leading through things that are uncomfortable and being vulnerable, in front of others, because that's hard to do. And I found just it when I can muster up that courage to do the things that are really uncomfortable, there's so much growth on the other side, and there's so much good that lives there, um, for me personally, but in the way that I can help others, lead others, inspire others, just make a difference of some kind. And it in most of those circumstances, it starts with me just, I gotta be courageous and go do this thing that I know is the right thing to do, and I know that I should, but I'm a little uncomfortable, and I just got to go do it. And so that mantra has helped get me into some circumstances that have just been so life giving for me and for others. Um, yeah, that's where that verse really sticks with me.
Nice. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. But well, cool. Well, uh, man, Josh, I really appreciate you making the time to come on. Share your wisdom. Kind of share some of the fine details of kind of your life. Like, I really appreciate your vulnerability and just giving like really practical, I think, nice tactical, um, things that men can take and incorporate into their lives. And I think people are going to take a lot away from this. So thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Faith Forged Fathers podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on whichever podcast platform you're listening from. Subscribe to the podcast and also head on over to Instagram and follow at Faith Forged Fathers. Thanks again for listening.